Dave here, and in this video I'm going to take you on a tour of the cities of Brussels and Bruges in Belgium, and these are both lovely and interesting places, so please join me and we'll explore Brussels and Bruges. These are some images of the Brussels Central Square, and some of the guidebooks describe this as the most beautiful central square in all of Europe. And given the facades of some of those buildings and all the gold work, it's kind of hard to argue that point. This building has an interesting story behind it. It was built in 1698, as you can see, and behind this door there was a library and a study room, and this is where Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto. And in the summer of 1847, Karl Marx was expelled from Paris for his radical writing, and he was admitted to Brussels on the basis that he wouldn't do any more of this radical communist writing, and he apparently agreed to that. But no sooner after he got here, he was joined by his partner Friedrich Engels, and they commenced immediately to write the Communist Manifesto, which he presented to the Communist League Conference in February of 1848 in London. And so the cat was out of the bag, and he was no longer allowed back to Brussels, and so he spent much of the rest of his life in exile, mostly in London, where he continued his writings after that. And what follows here are some scenes from the streets of Brussels. One of the things that I wanted to do in Brussels was go visit the European Parliament, and it's in the news quite a bit these days, mostly because of the Ukraine war, and so I bought a ticket to have a guided tour of the Parliament, but on arriving there for my tour was advised that the tour was cancelled, so much for that. The European Parliament consists of a legislative body that has more than 700 members, which are elected and represent the member countries, and they sit in this chamber that you see here, and it was empty on the day that I was there, so maybe that's why no tour that day. This display shows what it looks like when all the members are there. The EU also has something called the EU Commission, which is like an executive branch with a president. not elected by the way, but with a president that wields quite a bit of authority, which often puts it in conflict with some of the governments of the member states, so that'll be something to watch over time. After leaving the visitors gallery, I came across this art installation that has all these pipes and tubes going off in all different directions, so I thought that was pretty appropriate. And this is a look at some of the main buildings, which are quite attractive. After leaving the grounds of the European Parliament, I took the scenic route back to the city centre, and I came upon this amazing medieval cathedral that's been at this location since the 9th century. And this building started construction in the 11th century, and since we're in the 21st century now, that makes this building 1,000 years old. So quite remarkable. So I decided to go and take a look inside. There was a service going on, so I decided to take a look around and admire this incredible organ and some of the statuary around there and the confessional booths and so on. All of it very amazing. So here I am back in Brussels city centre for one more walk around before I take the train out of here tomorrow. There were a couple of highbrow cultural sites that I wanted to see while I was here, such as the Peace Palace and the Royal Palace, but they weren't open for visitors, so I couldn't see them. But one important cultural site that I did see is what you see on the screen right now, and that would be the mannequin piss. And that is a statue of the boy peeing in the fountain, and it's a much celebrated site here in Brussels, so I made sure to be there and stood there with all the other tourists taking a picture just to show that I'd been here. So there you have the mannequin piss. There's one final memory from Brussels I want to share with you, and it was mussels season when I was there. So every day I had a heaping plate of mussels and Belgian fries and Belgian beer, and it was truly fantastic. Okay, well that's it for the Brussels portion of this video. Next I'll be on a train heading for Bruges. See you there. Trains are an easy way to get around Europe. Just took about an hour to get to Bruges, and what you see now are some scenes from the central part of Bruges. Went on a walking tour in Bruges one day, and the guide asked why all of us had decided to come to Bruges, and most everybody, including myself, said it was because we'd seen the movie In Bruges, and you can see the poster here, and I highly recommend this movie if you haven't already seen it. Much of the movie was shot in a hotel when it wasn't out showing off the incredible architecture in the city, and that hotel is the building with the double gables and the orange-colored roof in the background there. One of the things I wanted to do in Bruges was to go to the museum at the Church of Our Lady, or as they would say in Belgium, Onze Lieve Vrove Kerke, or something like that, and see the Michelangelo statue of Madonna and Child. And that would be my next destination, except that I got a little sidetracked when I saw this beautiful building here, with something going on, so I decided to go inside and see what it was all about. Once inside, I found myself in the middle of an art gallery featuring the work of Salvador Dali. Now, Salvador Dali was an early 20th century artist from the Surrealist art movement, and it's an art movement that I know very little about, but I can say I just felt rather surreal being there, so maybe that all was meant to be that way. And it was made all the more so when I look at the pictures that I took there and see myself in one of the pictures in two different places actually, so not sure how that happened. And my next and last stop in Bruges is this cathedral, which has a museum in it, which houses various art pieces, as well as Michelangelo's statue of Madonna and Child. And this cathedral, like all those I've seen on this trip, is quite remarkable in its architecture and interior design and elaborate wood carvings inside of saints and important figures. And since it also has an art museum, there are various art pieces there. And here I think you see a different take on the Last Supper, I believe, and other art pieces as well. But the thing that everybody comes here to see is Michelangelo's statue of the Madonna and Christ Child. The story behind this sculpture, as told to us by our tour guide, is that in the very early part of the 16th century, Michelangelo was commissioned to build this sculpture for a church in Florence. And so after working on it for 2 to 3 years, he had an unveiling of it for the church fathers, and they promptly decided that they didn't like it. They felt that the expression on the Madonna was rather distant, but the real problem was the Christ Child, who was standing there front and center in full frontal, anatomically correct, naked glory for all to see. So they were just not going to have that in their cathedral. And that's when a couple of rich cloth merchants from Bruges got wind of this, so they traveled to Italy, talked to Michelangelo, bought the statue and brought it back to Bruges and placed it in this museum with the understanding that would be its permanent home. And that's where it remained until the French Revolution in the late 1700s, when Napoleon's army came through and they removed the statue and took it back to Paris with them. But it was recovered again after Napoleon was defeated and returned back to Bruges. Then, in 1944, when Hitler's army was rolling across Europe, they removed it from the museum and took it back to Germany and hid it in a salt mine somewhere, along with all the other art treasures they stole in Europe. And that's where it remained till after the war, when again it was recovered by these group of men called the Monuments Men, who recovered this and other art treasures after the war. One other detail about Bruges that the tour guide told us was that during World War II, when the Nazis came through here, they took one look at the city and decided it was too beautiful of a place to bomb, so in fact Bruges was never bombed during the war. It didn't stop them from stealing a whole bunch of art treasures, but that didn't work out too good for them either. Okay, that's it for this video about Brussels and Bruges. I hope you found something interesting here. So thanks for watching and bye for now.